Hey there, Pavel. Hey, Steve. Hey, Tomislav.
Hello.
Good morning.
Pavel, I really enjoyed your RCast yesterday. Well done.
Oh, thank you. Can you guys hear me right now?
Yeah,
Sure.
cool stuff.
Okay.
Hey there, Jim. Good morning. Hey, NetZipper. All right. We are 1 after the hour. As you perhaps know from yesterday's debrief and from announcements in the testnet channel, but I will reiterate it here, we are having some challenges with testnet, very specifically with, I think, the release of 9.9, we started experiencing nodes crashing, or validators crashing in testnet. In ways that we hadn't observed before. And so we have done a variety of things to capture more metrics about that to try and better understand what's happening, and to kind of puzzle out what might have introduced this problem. And at this point, we've run a testnet that rolled back the introduction of the 2 message queues. That's something that we had introduced in a recent release. This was intended, the 2 message queues resolved the issue that we as testnet users observed all of the time, which was you may not receive the approved block in a timely way. Sometimes some of us experienced, waiting for 10 minutes, waiting for an hour, and so we introduced these 2 message queues to kind of help Node prioritize doing that request and receive for the approved block, so that we can instantiate Casper and your node could get going with blockchain building. But it also seems to have possibly, we're not 100% sure yet, but it possibly might have contributed to the crashing that we observed. That is still under investigation. Simultaneously to the ongoing investigation, Pavel has been working in Casper to improve how Casper manages all of the messages that come in, and you as node users are very familiar with this. You see all of the requests for missing blocks, you see all of the sends that you do of blocks to all of your peers, and you see how very quickly, even in a relatively small network, so 10 validators and maybe 5 additional peers, how quickly that adds up in terms of message passing and messages coming into your queue, and how noisy that can become for Node. So that's where we are in terms of figuring out how to bring the public testnet back up and bring it back to its reliable performance state that we enjoyed previously. And so because we don't really have a testnet to play with, the intention for this particular session was to bring in some of our developers. We have Pavel, who works, it started kind of in the comm space and now is working in Casper. He's actually the one that's doing that work to improve message passing in Casper. Arturo is here. He is our leader in the rolling space. And I invited Kent, but I can't find him, so he's not here. And then our space team, we are experiencing a 48-hour period where I have no RSpace coverage because they are both on holiday. So we do have some developers here. Chris is also here. I'm here, and we intend to use this kind of as an AMA in terms of we're happy to answer any questions you have about the platform, about what we're doing, what we're looking forward to in the future. So with that, let me just stop talking and invite you to raise any questions or share your feedback and observations.
Kelly, I have a question.
Sure.
So on Tuesdays, we have a DApp developer working group, and one of the projects that we're working on actually through the collab with Jim Whitescarver and others is to create a sort of a voting mechanism using MacRobot. And as as that project gets developed and we get closer to getting cost accounting up and running, one of the questions that we had was that whenever someone needs to vote, that activates or triggers the smart contract. So there's a cost involved with that vote. So is there any indication or thoughts as to what the flow or gas costs would be for executing that smart contract for something as basic as a vote?
Archer, do you want to take that, or I can give a running start.
Excuse me, I got distracted. Can you repeat the question?
Well, let me give a running start, and then you add the details. How about that?
Yeah, cool.
So, Steve, I think the crux of what you're asking is it possible to estimate how much a deployment would cost if you're going to be using a particular contract? Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay. And Artur, can you add more detail to our ability to estimate the cost?
Yeah, so the way one estimates the cost is by running a read-only node and doing the deploy there. Then they should also be able to propose or otherwise trigger execution, and I'm not sure if we've got capability for that. And I'm also not sure how much of a possibility to have a read-only node we have can, so sorry, I'm more deep in the trenches.
Yes.
I can answer how this should work, not how it works currently.
My understanding is that when we have you guys as node users know this right now, right? When you are doing a deploy right now, you provide a flow limit. You specify a flow limit, how much you are willing to let this contract be for, and then to provide I think a max price. Forgive me, I'm talking off the top of my head. But in the end, what I understand the expectation, what the outcome should be, is when you execute a deploy in a read-only node, and you could do it in a standalone node, you should get feedback of what the execution cost would be in flow, so that when then you are ready to deploy it to a validator, you would be able to estimate how much rev you should provide. And then the next part of that is the validator then takes that contract, does the execution, and if there is any left over, would refund what's left over.
Okay, so and I guess maybe creating a context for a scenario. So what we know now or currently is that the validators will be the exchanges, and these exchanges will create the first shard, or the main shard will be the backbone of our chain, and the rates that will be created, will those, I guess the governance of what those guidelines of what those rates are, will that be in the hands of the validators or in the hand of our chain? So I guess that's so in when you mentioned that, we as a smart contract or as a deploy, we select what validator we want to execute our smart contract on. But if it's over the entire backbone, will we? I didn't realize we would have that choice to select. It would just kind of go out to the backbone network, and a validator would pick it up at the rate that was kind of predefined, and that predefined rate would be, in a sense, and that, I guess that brings up another question as far as, how are these rates, and who's going to be overseeing the creation of the rates, and whether they're high or low or accurate, and what influence a app developer will have in saying, hey, we have this smart contract, and we're doing these execution deployments, and we think the rate's too high. Will we have a voice in that? But I understand that it has to be economically viable for the validators in order to do their job. So I guess there's a lot of things in play there. So we're just kind of thinking through what's going to happen, or what needs to happen in order for something like someone to cast a vote on a blockchain, R-chain based voting mechanism. So just kind of working through that.
Yeah, in response to the several questions that you posed, so regarding the rate setting for the cost, whether is it up to an individual validator, or is it set by the governance of the platform? The short answer is, Steve, I don't know.
Okay.
I've heard conversations about it for quite some time, actually, but I don't know where that landed.
Sure.
So I think that, so just to be sure, by rates you mean flow price, right? The price at which
flow,
okay.
the cost of flow in Rev.
Yeah, so that's flow price. So as far as I remember, that was supposed to sorry for the background noise. That was supposed to be regulated by the market. So each validator would be able to say, configure for themselves at which rate, at which flow price, at minimum, they are going to accept deploys. And then each deployer gets to decide what flow price they are going to use when deploying on a validator. So as to how it's regulated, it's not, or the market regulates, as far as I know. Maybe Chris has some more input.
No, that's correct. Each validator ultimately has the deciding factor on whether transactions will be received based on flow price, and that will create an open market where you'll be able to find a validator that will do it at the price you've specified.
Okay.
I guess there remains a question: what happens when I specify a flow price bigger than configured on the validator? Who gets the surplus? I mean,
the validator does, for sure.
Okay, good to know.
And then, Steve, the other question I heard you ask was, whether you choose to deploy, that you as the deployer have an opportunity to choose the validator, or do you just deploy and validators pick it up? I think where we've landed on that is that you choose the validator.
Okay.
Yes, that's my understanding too. You specify the node you are connecting to with the CLI, I think.
Yeah, certainly that's currently how it works. You choose the validator and deploy to that. Go ahead, Chris.
But I think there's an expectation that very soon we will have those transactions gossiped to all the validators. So
that is my understanding as well. That's also my understanding that that's not a Mercury.
Come again? We are going to have those transactions what to all the validators? Gossiped. So I would understand that this would happen with the deploy landing in a block, and the block being propagated. And to my yeah, that certainly is going to be happening in Mercury, or is happening now. But if you're after gossiping the, I hate the word, but mempool, if we had one, yeah, probably that might be a requirement. I just haven't heard of it.
Yeah, there's this. We've had this conversation in the validator economic discussions. There's a censorship risk if you don't do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just so I guess there certainly is more to that than what we've covered. For example, how do we compensate, remunerate the parties that participate in that mechanism for operating the mechanism of gossiping?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the important thing for this discussion is definitely what Kelly said, which is for Mercury, you will send it to a specific validator.
Okay, very good.
Steve, did that cover your questions?
Yes, I think
Okay.
so.
Okay. Anything else?
Actually, in another topic, we were onto a different topic that we had in our DApp developer working group. I think it was Rao who brought this up, and he may be reaching out to you or someone. He had mentioned that there's a in working on the hardening of the system, that there's apparently there's games that are being created. The dev team has created some, but they need assistance on developing these games, which would be used as prototypes to help test out the system. And I guess these were games that were created on the Ethereum platform or some other platform. And so the task is, or the dev team needs assistance on converting those games to Rolang so they can be used. Is any of that correct, or am I?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent summary. I'm going to backtrack a little bit to make sure that everybody in this group is on the same page. So a little bit of history. Around the time of, actually about this time a year ago, we started working with Phil. I think many of you know Phil. Because Phil had been an active participant in the Ethereum, I think was called the Olympic Network, which was their incentivized testnet, and it was designed with the goal of incentivizing people to participate in games that were designed to do a variety of things to the network, stress the network, break the network, kind of all those fun hackery things. So Phil, as a community member, approached Meta and myself at that point and suggested that that's something that he would be interested in working on and contributing to in the Archain ecosystem. And by the time of Archon 3, we had a couple things. One, Phil had sketched out a variety of games that would be interesting on the Archain platform that could be used as in an incentivized game environment, and we obviously have all of that content. We also at that time had budget to provide prizes for the games, and had thought of ways that we could roll out various games in conjunction with the hardening effort of the Archain platform in its working up to the official launch of the Archain mainnet. And of course, then a lot of things happened in November. And so where we are today is we have all of the content that Phil helped provide in terms of game design and understanding for what exactly of the network that would, of the platform that would stress or challenge, or what we should expect to learn from that game. We have that. And in some aspects, it will inform some of the testing that we as the development team do once the Mercury release is code complete. And I was in that conversation with Rao the other week. The other opportunity is there's no reason why it just has to be the dev team. These games are fairly well specified. They certainly could be played by community members against the public testnet, for example. And it doesn't require a whole lot of infrastructure to run these games and to learn from them. So at that point, I shared with Rao the work that Phil had done, and if there's capacity either in the DApp largely in the DApp developer community, to be frank, is that are interested in kind of writing really large rolling contracts or rolling contracts that do some spooky things. Yeah, bring it, because that the more people that are using the platform, not just in our in our little kind of core dev team, but more community members that are doing these things against the platform, the better the platform will be. And so I invited Rao to take a look at that content and suggested that we could certainly be helpful in helping to do some coordination there, but having some community members step up and kind of execute those games would be a big bonus to the platform development. And there's really, frankly, no reason why some of those games cannot start now. It doesn't require Mercury being code complete to start playing some of those games.
Well, good. I think that'll go a long way to helping us build our knowledge of Rolang and just general familiarity for the DApp developer group, because we want to create tools for ourselves and for future DApp developers coming on, sort of a repository, and we've kind of identified Rolang.org as a location, but being able to have these tools or games to work with them, get a familiarity, and to have them as a central repository for others to have easy access to, so they can go and start working with it and build their knowledge. So that's all very helpful. So thank you.
Sure.
Kelly, I have an interest in Greg's approach to consensus where he was using the error correcting code. I guess this is more of an inside baseball question, but have you heard anything about that?
I have heard things about that, and as much as I'm tracking against the keywords that you just used, and I've heard Greg talk about that. I don't know much about it at all. Chris, do you?
I do not. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of where we are in development and working towards Mercury, that's not at all in scope.
I understand. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Rao.
Hey, Rao.
Sorry, I'm late. The Jim, in the meeting the other day, we were talking about what can be done to accelerate the testing with community help. One of the ideas Jim had subsequently was that there are already a whole bunch of Rolang programs that if we add to some test suite, that might help things. I was wondering, I guess related to that is the question of, obviously the actual testnet that is being that is presumed or supposed to be used by DApp developers, we don't want to have it go down too often, because they might want to save the state of the blockchain for them to do their testing and development. Is there a different environment where it's okay for it to go down quite often, and people don't have the expectation that any of their stuff would be saved from the previous version, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head. That is, you know, we recognize that DApp developers need a stable test network to run against in order to really hone in on what they're building and to see how it lives on a network environment, on the platform, a live platform. To that point, a couple things. One is, in general, our goal with the public testnet is to keep it live. And up until very recently, what that meant was on our side, on the administrative side, you know, I think we were doing a pretty good job of that in terms of being able to kill and restart nodes and to maintain some ongoing ongoing time and space with that. Where that gets a little tricky, and when you know what we expect is that we, as a development team, in the state that we're in, releasing pre-release software, do not have a requirement for backward compatibility. And so it is true that as we release software every 2 weeks, that from time to time, that means that we would be releasing a breaking change and would absolutely have to relaunch a fresh testnet, which means starting from scratch with a new Genesis block, because we do not have a requirement at this point for backward compatibility. In general, that would mean 2 weeks between the potential for breaking releases. We have observed that twice that didn't mean having to totally lose, but there were 2 releases where we did not have to start the testnet from scratch. We maintained the block store and just upgraded, and that was nice to prove that we could do that. But that's kind of the state of where we are in our development cycle. So that's expected. The unexpected is what we're observing right now, where testnet is down, and it's down unexpectedly, and it's been difficult to maintain. That's absolutely not an ideal situation, but it's very much also a reality of kind of the newness and the freshness of bringing this platform to an ongoing running state in a testnet environment. So that was kind of a long way route of me saying it is our goal to do that for testnet and to support DApp developers with the long-standing reliable network. And based on what we can expect related to breaking changes, that might be an issue. And then also sometimes the unexpected comes up and we absolutely can't support that. But it doesn't reflect our goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I guess I'm not necessarily arguing, or I'm not at this moment. I'm not really saying how do you keep the testnet more reliable. What I'm asking is, obviously we need an environment where we can break it, 20 times a day. Mm-hmm. Is there such an environment available so that the community testers, if they choose to, can deploy whatever they want to deploy, both in the testnet and the what I would call a dev test, where there is no expectation that it would live.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
The reason that's important is that the dev test can give an environment where you guys can more quickly gain insight into what's going on in the code, because you don't have to, there is no reliability expectation. So you don't have to throttle things or do things that would delay discovery of bugs. Right? I mean, in a testnet that is expected to be alive, you would probably throttle things, and then that would delay discovery of bugs, because until something happens, you would not do that. But I'm asking for a discovery net or a dev test net.
Yeah. Okay, forgive me. I didn't follow that the first time. So the answer to that is yes. That's a possibility, and I say that because we have currently a network set up. We have, as a development team, we have 2 development test nets that are set up and that we play with from time to time. DevNet 2 is currently stagnant. I mean, we're not using it right now. It's not a big deal to deploy these test nets. We're actually quite good at it at this point. So I think what you're asking is, could we make that one public? And I don't see any reason why not.
we just need to let people know that this, it's expected to go down multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And yet we should encourage people to deploy whatever they're doing onto it, so that with the right instrumentation, your discovery becomes quicker of potential issues.
Yeah, the one thing I would need to think about in relationship to that is the administration of that, because if it does crash a lot, now we're taking some SRE time to administer that. Again, I don't think that's a tremendous blocker, but I'm saying it out loud so that we know that there's a resourcing issue there.
Right, right. Is there a way to automate rebooting or bringing it up?
Yeah, it is automated. I'm thinking more of, could we share the effort of that? And I think the answer is yes. I think we potentially could share access to that platform related to DevNet, related to a DevNet that community members are using. I think we could find some trusted parties who could help support that and provide coverage for, oftentimes it's very easy to restart individual nodes. It's very easy to bring down a network and relaunch it with a push of a button. And I say this because I can do it, which means that anybody can do it. So I think it's just sharing the credentials to be able to do that. Let me write that down and noodle on that a little bit, Rao.
Sounds good. So this other part of what Jim was saying was that there are a bunch of Rolang programs already available that the community could collect and use to kind of create their version of the test suite, so to speak. I mean, is there a way to collect those? I mean, how would you go about doing that? To say, okay, here are all the Rolang programs that are out there that we should. Maybe Jim, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what the ideal thing would be, to clearly document how community members can contribute to the existing test suites that are the cooperative is using, and run their own tests.
Are these in a repo?
Well, they're scattered around.
Yeah, I think everybody has their own repo. Like if, for example, Tomislav is developing something, he's got his stuff, and somebody else is developing stuff, they have their own. They may even be like trial programs or learning programs or whatever they are.
Oh, I see. So, I mean, one thing we could do is via a wiki page, surface those various repos so that people could go and look at them. That's one.
Our plan was to get them all listed on Rolang.org.
Okay.
Which is community managed wiki.
Is that live now?
Yes.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, it's been live. I guess
yeah, Joshi's cow. I've been here before. Awesome.
Yeah, apparently Joshi is looking for somebody else to take over or something on that. But okay. Tomislav, since you're here, you have any thoughts on this subject as to how we can initiate and enhance or execute community testing to help them discover bugs faster, the develop team?
So I didn't think about that exactly, but yeah, I'll just extend your question to mainnet, because I'm thinking, is there a situation that mainnet will be erased or start over?
I
mean, is there a risk of that kind of stuff, or?
There is a risk. And with all platforms, there's a risk, right? That you would have to take down a network for critical reasons and restart fresh. That is absolutely not the goal. The goal at the launch of mainnet would be to be launching a platform that has demonstrated stability and demonstrated capability for being up and performant and maintained. There are plans to, when we talk about the first launch of mainnet, we also talk about planned patches to Mercury. A Mercury patch would be backward compatible so that we could upgrade the network without having to take it down. There's a little bit of risk there because there's we haven't really done that a whole lot yet, and it's, we'd have to be very careful in terms of delivering a patch and making sure that we could upgrade without breaking. And then Venus is intended to be a hard fork, meaning that it would be a breaking change. It would be a new network. The other part of it is that, should mainnet go down, and we need to bring it back up with a new Genesis block, and when we've talked about that, we've talked about it in terms of a hard fork where we could include, some information from the previous blockchain, but that, economics would play out, and we would, validators would want to build on a network where there are transactions and rewards. So a hard fork in that scenario, we understand that people would go to a blockchain that was then growing and leave the other one behind, but recognizing that in that scenario we would leave something behind.
I see, thanks. And this means that for Mercury we will have this this ability to update Rnode, right?
Yeah, and in fact, we have done that before. We demonstrated that kind of around the time of Archon 3 with our community validators at that point. We demonstrated it synchronously, meaning that all of the validators involved at the same time were making their upgrades, and we kind of orchestrated it so that the network didn't go down. We've also demonstrated an ability again at that time to do it asynchronously, meaning we told validators, in this 72-hour period, you need to upgrade your node, and also demonstrated that the platform stayed up. Now, I want to just give caution. At that time, the platform was very immature, and a lot of things that are in it today were not there at that time. So we haven't done this a lot recently. There's one other thing I wanted to say. Hold on. Oh, I know what it was. One of the we talked about this at our dev retreat, and Chris or Artur, if this sounds wrong to you, please jump in. But my takeaway from our dev retreat was that when we think about upgrading a mainnet, if we can, if it's, things that would be breaking, meaning that we would have to relaunch, would be changes that involved the proof of stake contract or system contracts. And that's where we would run the risk of needing to make a fork, needing to upgrade and create a fork versus just being able to upgrade. And so changes to system contracts is a space where we would have to be very thoughtful about, is this a fork or is this just an upgrade?
This seems a little strange because system contracts are not stored on the blockchain, right?
System processes aren't stored on the blockchain. System contracts or
system processes, yeah. Oh, system contracts.
So the blessed contracts, the ones included in the Genesis block, are obviously stored in the chain because
I see.
Genesis is part of the chain. It is the case, though, that regarding upgrade conversation, I think the last word we've said was that we currently don't see a better way of upgrading than having kind of a new Genesis. Everything else we've considered had so many caveats that we didn't have a conclusive answer. There might be cases where simply doing a deploy from a co-op controlled deployer, co-op controlled private key, could fix things, could upgrade things. There will probably be cases where just downloading later node software and restarting is going to be enough, and we probably will be able to maintain some variety of node software versions. But in general, a new Genesis, a new shard would be needed. Chris, keep me honest, please.
Nope, that's accurate. And just to add a little more color to it, though, at Mercury, there won't be any validators that are not under the control of the co-op. So we'll completely manage that.
So when we say restarting nodes from co-op controlled nodes or validators, is it sort of similar to a typical backup and restore type of a process, as different from starting the whole thing with a new Genesis block, or is there, can someone explain if there is any I guess any tracking or backing up of state that's going on along the way that will help minimize the impact of having to bring up the network again?
Yes.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Well, I was going to speak to the block store. Is that what you were going to speak to?
I was going to keep it kind of generic because it's likely going to depend on exactly what we're doing and why, like what the fix is, and why. And so in most scenarios, the what's envisioned is that think of the fork choice tip N being at the point at which we have to roll out the update. Whatever's in this, represented as the state from that fork choice tip will be carried into the Genesis block of the newly deployed software. So yeah, that's what the upgrade would do, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense for sort of a planned upgrade or a guided upgrade. But what if the system came down and you have to restart? My question was, what of the previous state of the system was being tracked and saved so that the damage is not as much when you come back up?
That's the block store. I mean, that's what we observe now. Like a node goes down, it has a saved state, it's saved to the state, and when it comes back up, it picks up where it left off. So maintaining the Genesis block, maintaining its blockchain, and rejoins the network, and may have to catch up. The catch up will then depend on how much downtime that node experienced. If all of the node, let's imagine all validators went down, and we didn't need to make any breaking changes to bring it back up, we would just restart it, every validator relying on their block store. There would be and then a bit of time for them to realign on where they were when they went down.
I think the issue might be that if you have a new Genesis block,
it wouldn't be a new Genesis block.
I'm sorry?
In this scenario, there would not be a new Genesis block.
Okay, but they were saying that if there's an upgrade to the software, you would want to have a new Genesis block, in which case you have a new blockchain.
Yes, that was the planned upgrade. And then Rao asked, what about an unplanned, the system went down and we had to restart it. And that's the reason I was I kind of paused on that one, is that there's, the idea of quote unquote the system going down is just a concept for me that's not really. The system is the current state of the blockchain, and whatever, like every validator has its view into what that state is. And so when those validators come back up, they still have that view. If they lost all those blocks, there has to be at least one validator that has that view. Otherwise, there is no blockchain. Does that make sense?
I guess what I'm asking is, let's say you've got 1 million blocks. You upgrade the software. Now you have a new Genesis block. Okay. Now, what is the previous state resurrected in some manner or lost, or
It gets carried into that new Genesis block, Jim.
The last, well, hold on. It's not the entirety of the state that gets carried into the Genesis block. It would be the last finalized block. Is that right?
Yes, but at the same time, this is all that is needed, because the notion of finalization is that basically we are not going to need to replay any of the previous deploys, any of the previous block past finalization. So we can treat it as the new Genesis, whatever data is in the tuple space. At that block, we can carry over to other nodes. I guess a question remains: how do we transfer the data? Yeah, that could be as simple as copying the rspace directory. That's at least my current understanding of things.
So does that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you. Yeah, all the as long as we move the state across, we have the same world computer. That's
and this stuff is all documented somewhere, or it's still in process? Oh.
Excellent question. We have documentation of meeting notes from the dev retreat and additional conversations that have happened related to this particular topic. In terms of, can I point you to documentation of this is how the platform works? The answer to that is no.
Okay. I mean, the reason I'm asking is one of the things I'm looking into is what kind of questions dApp developers might have and what kind of documentation might they need. And these are probably some of the kinds of questions they would ask.
Agreed.
So that's fine. We'll just deal with that documentation issue separately.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, I mean, what I'm hoping for is that there will be some kind of a dev test or like you were saying, a dev test 2 that you have that maybe can be made available to the community so that they can throw at it whatever they're throwing at the testnet or any additional things. Some may be just, like I said, there may be a test suite that could probably be developed in addition to whatever you folks are doing. Mm-hmm. As far as instrumentation is concerned, to see what's going on with the either memory heaps or other resources and log analysis, are you guys using something like Splunk or something else, or how does that work? Meaning, the question really I'm asking is, if we do go against this dev test 2 and do some testing, how do we make it useful for you? I mean, is there a lot of work for that to become useful to you, or you already have methods?
It's already set up. So our development, I mean, all of the test networks right now, the public as well as the internal, they have we have monitoring tools and measurement tools and the ability to aggregate logs, for example. All of that's in place.
Okay. And then the dev test 2 would not be as restrictive as the general testnet to make sure that to ensure longevity or survival. Is that correct or no?
I mean, you could do with it. I imagine people doing it with it what we currently do with how we currently use a DevNet, which is, sometimes I'll launch a test and want it to run for about 12 hours. And then take it down and do something different. A complexity of having a shared resource like that is, not killing a test before somebody else is done with theirs. Does that make sense?
Yes, but
yeah,
I mean,
it can go up and down all day long.
Right. I mean, what I'm thinking is that if it is a community-based one, we expose it 24/7. And if it goes down, it goes down. And whoever is in the middle of a test that got bumped will restart their test or whatever, is how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I think that, there should be a channel where, people who are using it coordinate.
And that's what we typically do. If I'm getting ready to do something, I check in. Is anybody else, I see this network running. Is anybody using it right now? And give some time for someone to say yes or no.
And I think from your bug finding perspective, I guess you are probably better off with a single test running at a time as opposed to multiple people doing multiple things, or there's no such concern?
For the support, for simplifying the work of debugging, it is certainly helpful to do one thing at a time so that you understand what your constraints are and what your environment is. But if you're interested in exploring chaos, then that's valid too, right?
Right. So good. Thank you very much. Yeah. So maybe we can make some progress on that in the next few days.
My action item there, Rao, is I'm gonna I need to think a little bit about how we can share access to that infrastructure, especially as it relates just to administration, because I don't want to add more overhead to the SRE team in that space.
Good.
Kelly, at our DApp developers meeting yesterday, we spent a lot of time talking about not having the API working. Are there any thoughts you could share with us about where that project might be?
You're talking about the RChain API?
Yeah.
I'll tell you in terms of development work of the core dev team on the RChain API, that is not in scope for our efforts right now. We are fully focused on delivering the Mercury release. There are no development core dev team resources to extend to making any investigations or changes to the RChain API. The RChain API emerged as a community tool. Was it Dan that did it? I don't remember who first did it.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, and I'm not please don't hear me saying this curtly or disrespectfully, but from our perspective, it's a community tool that needs community maintenance and improvement.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
understand that there's a Python 3 API that's they're using as part of the testing or something.
Yes, the SRE team released this week some sort of Python API that helps support. It doesn't provide the full coverage that the RChain API provides, but it does provide coverage for running transactions on a blockchain.
Thank you.
So I guess if that were to be further developed, is it? Are there now two avenues for that, or is it the same? Meaning,
I don't see them as conflicting. They're not the same. They're different. Tomasz built out this particular one to support running transfers in the hardening network, and was able to share. Is certainly willing to share that with others who might want to play with it as well.
And is there any benefit to extending what he has done? As opposed to fixing and maintaining what Dan has done, is what I'm wondering.
As I understand it, and I will be very frank, I'm not fully versed in exactly what the RChain API, everything that the RChain API does, but as I understand it, the RChain API, it provides much more coverage for Node than what the one Tomasz built does. So I guess on the one, we could. My concern about adding to Tomasz's is that if it breaks, now we have some real problems in our testing environments. So PRs pulled against that would need to be reviewed and tested before we can't be willy-nilly about that because we're relying on it. But I don't know. Chris, do you have any thoughts? My hunch is that the thing to do would be to maintain and augment the RChain API.
Yeah, I think right now the demand for JavaScript compatible code is higher than Python, although it would be nice to have both. If we can get somebody who wants to work on either one of them, I think that would be good. And I'm hoping actually Thomas next month can help guide fixing that.
No,
Oh,
I mean,
I mean Thomas Love. Thomas
oh,
Love.
Thomas Love. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
fiercely defensive of my developers.
Yeah, this is one and where Greg has been really vocal about wanting to see the community step in and keep, our chain API a community sponsored tool. So.
Hey.
Yeah, at the same time, go ahead, whoever is
Hey,
speaking.
this is Rnode Zipper. I started to try to fix the JavaScript library. As far as I remember, there is two issues. We need to update the protobuf interface and to update signing libraries from previous crypto functions. Is there anything else we should fix?
Nothing that I'm aware of. Those are the two that do need to be done.
Okay.
But I will say, I've said this in chat in Discord, that we are before Mercury going to be making changes to how developers will get information about what's happening at specific names put into their code off chain. And so I'm trying to come up with a roundabout way of saying this without using the term listen for data at name. So
Well done.
Relaying execution results off chain.
Thanks,
oh
Artur.
Even worse.
So at any rate, that just be aware that is coming, and we will and once that is in, we'll need to update our chain API one more time to utilize that new mechanism.
Okay, cool.
But as of today,
actually,
yeah, go ahead. As of today,
one,
those are the only two changes I'm aware of that need to be made.
Yeah, just one more remark. If there is a need for JavaScript developers for our chain API, they should easily update as they are JavaScript developers. So if they are not updating this library, most probably there is no such a huge need for JavaScript library. Because I don't think this is way too complicated to switch to different signing libraries and to update protobuf, because most of the stuff should be the same from my perspective.
Well, the our chain API hasn't worked in Robot for about a year now. I think
do you know why that is?
I think
Robot is running like 9.6.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, that was working back in on a really early version. But
Jim, update your software.
but the thing is, I guess what I'm saying is it's enough work to do the updates in calling the API, and also having to fix the API itself. I'm hoping somebody else will, can fix the API itself. Then I can fix Robot.
I mean, is the API that broken? The last I heard was that.
Yeah, we just don't have JavaScript people involved in the work studies.
I see.
Not lately, since we ran out of.
Just out of curiosity, Jim, what language client would you guys prefer? Like, if you don't have JavaScript people, what do you have?
We don't have any developers really.
Oh, okay. So it's not that it's JavaScript; it's that it's you don't have developers.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
The DApp developer. I mean, we have a number of people in Colab that are more into the computational calculus and other aspects. In terms of application developers, we're we're using command line Rnode for most.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't desire for yet another language.
But there are environments. There's environments based on JavaScript that make it very attractive to have that working. So I would say in terms of other environments besides the command line, I would say JavaScript would be the top choice that would be most useful for adaptive developers that I know.
I heard the clock in someone's room. We are at the top of the hour. I want to make sure to be respectful of people's time. So we are at the top of the hour. If you have something that you need to go to, you are now 60 seconds late. And I would like to wrap up this session here out of respect for the time that others have dedicated to this. So with that, I will end this session. Hopefully, we are working towards some fixes and should be back hopefully running with testnet or doing some sort of more active testing in our sessions next week. As always, really truly appreciate your time as our chain community members to participating in these conversations, to being interested in the platform. You absolutely do make this platform better, and you are a critical piece of its development in as much as the core team is as well. So thank you. And I will see you again next week.
All right, later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Dev team.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.